8-3 of hearts. Wow, I'm dialed in, baby. Dialed in, baby.
Hey, how's it going? Gareth James here for mttpokerschool.com, and joined today by special guest Dara O'Kearney. I'm hoping I got that right this time. How you doing, Dara?
I'm doing very well. Delighted to be here, Gareth.
So thank you very much for coming on. Fresh off playing a 25k, I believe, in the last week.
Yeah, I wish that was fresh off cashing a 25k, but yeah, I played the 25k high roller in Parafest. First time I'd ever played a buy-in that big, obviously online or live. So that was quite an experience.
Yeah, I bet. I railed you for a little bit of it and saw players like Jason Kuhn at your table. So that must have been a great experience.
Yeah, it was. Jason was actually on my WSOP final table as well, so at least I had a bit of history with him.
Okay. Yeah.
And I had played quite a bit of with him deep in that event as well. But I think it was probably the first time I played against Filatov. He was on my table for a lot of it as well.
Okay.
Chrissy Bicknell was there too, but I have played quite a bit with her online.
Oh, cool. So what do you think it's going to be like going back to your regular grind now after playing a 25k?
Well, I was a bit worried about that because I was obviously devastated. I actually went near enough to the bubble. I think I was 8 away from the money, and the min cash was just 60 grand. So
oh wow.
So I remember going to bed thinking, am I going to be okay tomorrow, getting up grinding my normal schedule? But actually, I felt fine.
Cool.
I went straight back into it, and I got 11th in a run-of-the-mill Power Fest yesterday. So I was as happy about that as I ever would be. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it affected me. It was weird playing the 25k though. I did actually feel sort of physically sick after busting it.
Really,
which never really happens to me. But I guess it's understandable since it's the first time I'd played that level.
Yeah, for sure. Well, appreciate you telling us all about that. So yeah, the reason I wanted to talk to you today and get you on was to talk through this, I guess, incredible, amazing. Trying to find some other superlatives for this hand that Jeff Gross played. So I guess if we just give the viewers a quick rundown of what happened. So we pick up the action here on the turn. Now we don't actually get to see what happens on the flop, but working it out through the pot, I can see that it looks like Jeff raised from the hijack, the big blind defended, and the flop went check, check.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I mean, obviously Jack 10 suited is a hand that would open, and when you flop this strongly on the flop, you would be very tempted to check behind. I mean, I would probably still go ahead and bet, but then my strategy on boards like this is just to bet 100% of the time, but to use a really small sizing.
Yeah, I like that. I think we talked a little bit before we started the video. I think I tend to bet a little bit more, and I know that you were talking about sort of 20-25% of the pot. I think I probably go with like 30, but there's small differences, not too much. The main reason that I would start with a bet here is because I imagine we have a huge range advantage in this situation. What are your reasons for going for the small bet?
It's purely because I'm betting 100% of the time. So if I'm going to, I have a lot of air in my range, obviously, and if I'm going to fold to say a big check raise, then I've lost less when I bet small. If I do have a value hand, I actually want to encourage action. I want him to make him continue with the wider range. I think when we bet, like if we bet really big here, we make it very easy for him to play. He can just fold all of his hands that haven't connected with the board. But when we bet small, we actually, if he does that, he's making a mistake because I'm betting 100%. So a large part of my range is exploiting, if he's going to fold ace high and king high, all his ace highs and king highs without thinking about it, or hands that have backdoors.
Yeah. By
betting a smaller amount, I think I make it more difficult for him. He now has to continue with a much wider, weaker range.
Yeah, I mean, do you think as well, I don't know if you've heard the piece from Charlie Carroll in the last week where he talks about betting small in order to cap your opponent's range. So that might be going on here as well. You'd expect the strongest hands in your opponent's range to raise. I mean, maybe if he has Jack 10 himself, or I mean, he probably doesn't have pocket tens. But if he has a Jack in this situation, you'd expect him to raise. Jack 10 may well just go ahead and flat call the flop. So yeah, when he does just call on the flop, then it's still sort of go time on the turn and the river to apply a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. I think it just makes it more difficult for him to play the hand because it's very hard for him to check call in any sort of balanced way without capping his range. So, we are forcing him to check call more, but check calling in his seat still kind of sucks because he caps his range, and we have options to overbet turns, for example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Particularly blank turns. I mean, he won't cap his range on every turn.
No.
We should say, like, when a heart rolls off on the turn, he can have flush draws, or when something that completes any sort of straight draw or gut shot, he could have all of those if we've used the smaller sizing. But on an absolute brick like the two of clubs, he clearly has capped his range on the flop, and we should probably go ahead and overbet the turn now.
Yeah, I love that. We pick it up then on the turn, and we see the big blind lead is about 81% pot, and Jeff goes ahead and just calls here. Can you see any other play here with this hand and maybe with your range?
No, I don't see much point in particularly this hand. I don't see any point in raising, because if we raise, we're just going to fold out the bluffs.
Yeah.
The sizing is quite interesting from, I'm not sure how to say that name. I'm going to go with Nataran, who I actually know for as long as I've been playing online. He's been beasting at the higher stakes. I don't know who he is personally, but yeah, he's a very good reg.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess his sizing is reasonably balanced. He may also think that Jeff has actually capped his range by checking behind on the flop. So if that's the case, then his turn donking range could actually be quite bluff heavy. And if it is quite bluff heavy, we obviously want him to keep bluffing.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think about this? To go sort of further into the sizing, do you think this is the right sizing because he has a number of bluffs and some value hands here?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I mean, I think because, like, if you can look at it from a couple of perspectives. If you're bluffing and you think that Jeff has usually capped his range on the flop, then you don't want to just make a small bet here, which allows him to sort of continue with a fairly wide range. You want to put him to a pretty difficult decision. So you use the bigger sizing to put maximum pressure on. This is when you're bluffing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when you actually have a value hand, it also makes sense actually to use this sizing too, because once the flop goes check and a street has been taken out, you want to somehow get all the stack in. And like if you make a small bet here and Jeff calls, it's going to be very hard to get all the chips in. But by using this sizing, I mean, if Jeff calls now, the pot's going to be 30k almost. Yeah. And with only 22k behind, then you can shove river.
Yeah, I think that's something really worth noting here is for both of those reasons. Then applying the pressure, putting lots of chips in when you actually have the hand as well, and then being able to shove the river for just less than pot. So Jeff does go ahead and call, and we see the 9 of hearts on the river, and the big blind goes ahead now and checks, and the decision's on Jeff. Before we see what he does here, what are your thoughts at this point?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a couple of straight flushes possible now. I mean, King, Queen of Hearts is a credible hand for the big blind to have, and also any hand with the 8 of Hearts in it is a straight flush as well.
Yeah.
So it's not like we have the mortal nuts anymore. Up to this point in the hand, Jeff had to assume he had the best hand. Obviously, there was a straight flush possible on the turn as well, the 8, 9 of Hearts, but that's just one combination. Yeah. Suddenly now there's a lot more straight flush combinations. But I mean, that said, we do have top house.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of credible hands that we're ahead of, pocket sevens, flushes that aren't straight flushes.
Yeah.
So it feels like there's enough hands there that we should go ahead and value bet.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, he can, sevens is obviously one of those. He might shove that pre-flop. I think he started the hand with maybe around 20 big, so he's more likely, I think, to jam that pre. But Jack 7 is definitely, he can have Jack 10 himself. He can have Jack 9 in this spot as well.
Yeah.
Plus all of those flushes, as you already said. I think the thing here is if you look at it, we start the hand with a full house. On the flop we start with a full house. To think about it and say, okay, how many streets of value are we going to get with this hand? And if we check here, we're going to turn it into a 1 street hand. Becomes kind of a joke.
Yeah.
So, like, okay, there are some instances where perhaps, you know, things change, and so your hand that's very strong on the flop is suddenly not very strong on by the river. But yeah, okay, we don't have the nuts here, but we still have a strong enough hand to go ahead and value bet. So yeah, I think we have to go ahead and jam here. Jeff does actually go ahead and check back, and then, you know, he goes crazy because the big blind actually has the straight flush.
What was the big blind's hand?
I think it was 8-3 of hearts.
8-3 of hearts.
So he has the flush on the turn, and then rivers the straight flush. Just trying to flick through. Yeah, 8-3 of hearts. You can just about see it there. Yeah, so I think it's, you know, it's really important not to be results orientated, as we say here, but results oriented if you're in North America. To, you know, to look at this and go, okay, he's made an incredible check back here, because I think he's losing a lot of EV. And I know I saw a lot of discussion of this hand on Twitter, and he thought, you know, it's definitely not GTO, but sometimes, you know, when you're in the zone, when you're dialed in, you know, you should be making this check back. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when we shove here, for the shove to be correct, we only have to be ahead slightly more than 50% of the time when called. So the fact that there are some hands out there that are beating us is not a reason not to shove.
Yeah,
we should be counting the combinations of hands that beat us with the combinations of hands that we beat.
Yeah.
And will call the shove. And I think if we do that, we would definitely find more hands that we're ahead of here in the calling range. So yeah, I mean, I don't really buy the whole dialed in thing, because that always feels sort of after the event thing to me, because we happen to be right.
Yeah.
We attribute this sort of, well, he's in the zone. And that's why he made this great check behind, which turned out to be right. But I think if it's wrong, then people will go, oh, he lost his mind. Why did he bet? And the guy turns over the nut flush or something that might have called.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the problem with that is, it's like, when I'm coaching my students, I do get them to think in terms of on the river, like, just list all the hands you think that will call you, and then work out how many of them you're actually ahead of and how many you're behind. And if there are more you're ahead of, then you have to go ahead and bet, even though you will sometimes run into a better hand. I think it's basically a sort of a design flaw in the human brain, where we sort of remember these really memorable cases. You know, something like this is far more memorable than, say, Nataran has a hand which is behind. That then it becomes a more mundane hand, and it won't stick in our memory as much. Yeah. So we have this sort of confirmation bias where we remember the occasions when the guy is right and we think he's done something wonderful. Yeah. But in reality, I think this, even though it worked out well for him, this is a fairly clear value bet on the river.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we see a lot of this sort of thinking in the things like the World Series. We see a lot of hands reported on social media, and you see them on Poker News. And you see like someone making a cool down, and they happen to be right, but actually, you know, the hand that they've chosen to bluff catch with is a really bad bluff catcher, and a lot of the time they're just not going to win the hand. But everyone loses their mind and thinks it's amazing because they've made this fantastic river call, when actually, you know, it's not that fantastic. It's just fantastic because of the result. And I think we need to move away from, you know, focusing on the result so much, and more on the sort of process of, as you said, like looking at the combos of hands that you beat versus the hands, the combos that you lose to. Yeah,
absolutely. Having said that, I did just post on my Instagram story that I was recording the session with you, and I guess Jack Sinclair picked up which hand we're doing.
Okay.
He just sent me a message saying, "Best hand ever, Jeff Gross, the new GOAT." So.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that's one opinion. Okay, that's great. Thank you, Dara. I really appreciate you giving up the time to come on and talk through this hand. I think it's a really interesting hand. I think there's lots to learn from it. And I will wrap things up there. This has been Gareth James for mttpokerschool.com. Catch you later, guys. Bye-bye.